Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Nations round number 9, driving at the Nurburgring GP track in the Group 3 cars, the GT3 cars. I'm using the Mercedes AMG GT3 for this race. I decided to pick this car obviously because I'm using it in the manufacturer series. It makes more sense to get more preparation in for Saturday's top 24 race. As you can see there, starting from pole position in the AMG, really happy with qualifying. Both laps would have been good enough for pole position, over 3 attempts ahead of P2, and really did 2 okay laps. They weren't amazing, there was a couple of attempts left in them, but reasonably happy with that lap, with the strict track limits. I think during practice sessions in the lobbies, a lot of people were, let's say, abusing the chicane limits compared to the settings that were in the FIA settings, so I was happy with a 1 minute 57.2. As we go through the grid and see some of the times, you see going through 58.0 in P7, so 8 tenths faster than P7, so the lap must have been a reasonably good lap. I mean, I don't know what other splits were like. I think I had another maybe 3 tenths left in there, 56.8 or 9, but not much more than that, I think, without obviously risking picking up some big penalties within the qualifying session. Obviously that's not what you want to do. With only really 2 laps available within the qualifying session, I didn't want to be picking up any sort of penalties as we go through to the back end of the grid. A Beetle there. The car choices you can see mainly Mercedes, Porsche, the Evolution, but one thing, like I said, with the Evolution was the car isn't particularly great at starting, so it's quite a good thing to have that car around you when you're in the grid in a Mercedes or a Porsche, because them 2 cars will start better than the Evolution in this race. It's a given, and it's one thing that I'm looking forward to at the final top 24 races. The fact that Mercedes is not a bad starting car and a strong car at that track will be the Evolution, so if that car is ahead of me and on the grid, I've got a good chance straight away of picking up a place at the start of the race. As we're going to start this race straight away, going through to the TV replay camera for the start of this race, going to concentrate on that view as we see all 20 cars starting this race, and let's see if we can get a clean start in this top split race. Let's hope it's a lot better than the Monza race that we saw the other day on my channel. And we're about to get the lights out, the cars are revving, they're about to go, and you see, managed to get a nice start. There's movement in the background, I can't really see what's going on there. Let's have a little look, see if I get through to turn 1. Totally clean and pulled away from the competition. There's a chaos going on in the background. Something's happened there. We're going to check that out at the end of the race, but there was a car going off the barriers, and that is, if you have a little look, it looked like one of the brake markers disappeared. I was not aware of that at this point in the race, so as you see the Porsche getting a little bit sideways, trying to get on the power. The first thing I wanted to do in this race was try and break the slipstream from the car behind me. I knew it would be so important that I had to try and do it. I couldn't really risk doing too many laps of trying to break the slipstream at the start. So the out lap, the first lap away from the starting grid, was where I had to try and do it. It's going to be hard. The Porsche is a very fast car through the corners, so I had to try and just do it really on the straights. But the AMG GT3 is not the fastest car down the straight, so it was going to be a bit of an effort to try and break that slipstream. I was getting very close, you see, building up around 6 tenths, but as soon as we get through to the corners, the Porsche is able to just gain in a little bit, and then he's picking up the slipstream on the straights. I'm going to keep going though to try and break that slipstream. I'm not going to give up yet. I'm going to give it all, pretty much everything, all the way through to the opening lap, and if I haven't done it then I'm going to have to resort back to a fuel saving tactic of short shifting and saving some fuel, because I don't want to put myself in a vulnerable position when we come through to the pit stop phase. And you can see there, going onto the back straight, the Porsche is managing to hang on there. I'm building up a little bit of a gap as soon as we get on the power on the exit of that corner, but he's then bringing that gap back down as we come through to the chicane. A very tricky chicane now with the very strict track limits, but I didn't find it too hard to do that chicane, keeping it within the limits, to be fair, because it was quite defined that the white lines were the limits, and it's not a really fast chicane, it's quite a slow pace chicane, so it wasn't the hardest to make sure you got through there without picking up a penalty. As you can see, trying to break that slipstream as we ride on board with P2 as he's chasing me down, trying to stay in my slipstream. You can see braking a little bit late there because obviously the brake markers had been took out on that previous lap. I was not aware of that, obviously starting from pole position, so when we got to the braking zone it was a little bit of a panic moment, but I managed to still stop the car in a reasonably okay place. I just realised it was a bit late, so kept the car as straight as possible, and then brought the car back into line on the right at the latest point possible. But I knew then, obviously with no braking reference for the next lap, I knew that I was going to have to brake a little bit earlier this time because the braking reference has gone. So I've decided for the next time we get to that corner, I'm going to need to brake fractionally shorter and see how that works out. And then obviously the lap after that, then I'll have my braking reference sorted. I knew there's that shadow on the track, but obviously depending on the fuel you're running, you might have to just brake it fractionally later or shorter. It all depends. It's not too much difference to time trial, but obviously I still kind of use them boards between the 150 and the 100 as my main reference, so it does trick you a little bit as you go into these points, but it's the same for everyone else. But it all depends what points different people use as their reference. I tend to always use the boards as a main reference and then pick up track reference points on markers on roads and stuff as a second reference point. As you can see now, just trying to make sure that I stay out of that main slipstream. He's picking it up there, but again on the exit of that corner, always picking up a really good exit in the AMG GT3, and the Porsches couldn't live with the AMG on the exit of that corner, and then it's not got enough grunt to really make any sort of move, even though I'm short shifting and saving fuel. So I'm thinking now possibly that the Porsche is going to resort to the same type of tactic as myself, because he's not really getting anywhere by revving it out, so probably doing short shifting as well to try and save his fuel all the way to the pit stop phase as I go again to try and avoid him picking up that slipstream. It's quite drastic. He's not really bothering to go for it, but that suits me because as long as he doesn't get the main part of my slipstream down the straight, it makes it a lot easier going into the braking. This time very early on the brakes, you can see the Porsche went a little bit more aggressive, so he pushed the limits a little bit more on the braking. I went a little bit safer, but now I've got my reference point pretty much sorted. I've worked it out from obviously the first attempt at it where I braked late, and then the second attempt where I braked a little bit earlier there. So now for lap 4 I should be able to get that braking reference pretty much perfect. But you can see 2 or 3 cars behind me up to P4, right pretty close there. You've got a gap then between P4 and 5, so the early pace has worked out for me because it's built me a cushion up now. So it's really a battle for top 4 places so far in this race. You can see myself in the AMG GT3, P2 and 3 in the Porsche 911, and P4 in the Mitsubishi Evo. So that poor start has really affected that Evo. You can see he obviously didn't get away from that line where he started P2 and now he's in P4, although now he's got the benefit of pretty much a triple slipstream to let himself save some fuel in the pit stop phase. So not the worst situation to be in if he can maintain the speed and get into the pits not far behind myself in P1. This is quite an intriguing race. You've got a lot of 3 different cars in the top 4 all battling out for the win in this race. I'm probably in one of the hardest situations really, because I've got no slipstream. I've got to keep reasonable pace so I don't get overtaken, and I've got a short shift as well. So just trying to keep the short shifting going, save some fuel, and keep reasonable pace as well, because I did not want P5, 6 and 7, that other gap, to really be closing in on me. I wanted to make sure that, you know, even if other cars, if say the top 2 outdo me on fuel, at least I can come out the pits in at least P2 or 3, and then obviously go a little bit more aggressive with the fuel and then attack when they haven't got the slipstream to work with. As we go through the final corner for the start of lap 4, gonna again go over to the right hand side. I knew he wouldn't probably follow me because he didn't before, and that really just benefits me because he's not going to get the bulk of my slipstream, and then I can get that gap to near 6 tenths of a second. You can see the gap in the mirror building up as I get my brake reference much better this time. A little bit aggressive, but it wasn't too bad. You can afford to brake a little bit late there. It enables you then to get on the power reasonably okay, and the gap is staying around half a second. So the tactic was now at this stage of the race was, if I can just hold the gap around 5 tenths of a second, if he makes one mistake, I can then use up some fuel and try and break the slipstream. That was the aim of the race basically for the first stint. It's the best tactic to do rather than just blowing your fuel away and getting to the pits with no fuel and getting probably outdone by 3 or 4 cars. It's kind of a good tactic just to do steady short shifting. You see around about 60% revs there, you can see 70% revs, sometimes revving it out more depending on whether I felt there was a chance of getting a bit of a boost and getting rid of that slipstream. You can see coming through this corner, wanting to get on the power really early and try again to build up a gap as we go up this hill, because this is where the AMG is a little bit stronger than the Porsche, because the Porsche then is a little bit faster through this corner. I can see the gap going to 7 tenths of a second, so I felt like this was an opportunity. You can see myself revving the car out a lot more now and being a lot more aggressive, up to 8 tenths of a second nearly the gap, as the Porsche getting closer through this section of the track. But then we're going to go on to this right hander, but I didn't quite hook that corner up, but unfortunately still got quite aggressive on the power as it's staying around 7 tenths of a second, the gap to P2. And this is the kind of gap where you've got a really strong chance of breaking the slipstream because they're only picking up a very slight amount of that slipstream. So it's going to be important to hook this chicane up and be fairly aggressive. You can see trying to get close to the limits of the track, and I've managed to get that gap to around a second. Now this is really important. Now going into the final corner, this is where the AMG is a little bit stronger than the Porsche. So on the power nice and early, the Porsche struggles for traction sometimes getting on the power there. I know that because I've driven the Porsche so many times at this track. And now the gap is over 1 second. I don't have to start trying to break that slipstream. So this is important to just stay on it now for a little bit and just get that gap maybe about 1.2, 1.3 seconds like it is now, and then I can start resorting back to the short shifting like I did there, short shifting it now to try and save some fuel and keep the gap. I felt like I had more pace than the Porsche, and it looked like I was pretty much correct in that as I'm now short shifting and maintaining the gap and actually building up on that. A slight mistake though on the curb there where I tried to get on the power, the rear started to go a little bit loose as I got on the power, but you can see the gap that I've managed to build up there by using that tactic of short shifting until there was an opportunity, and once the opportunity was there I went for it, and it's really worked out for myself as I've got about a 1.5 second lead as we head on into the pit stop phase of this race. As now you can see we've managed to drop one of the Porsches. It looked like the Porsche in P3 has made an error somewhere. Maybe there was an overtake attempt by P3 in this race, the Evolution driver, or he made an attempt at an overtake on the other Porsche. I'm not too sure, but he's disappeared pretty much. I think that was him right there, way there, backing out of the top 10 by the looks of it. So a disaster for that Porsche, but this is better for myself now because I can just concentrate on the race. I've only got 2 cars behind me. This is looking like pretty much a definite top 3 position in this race. If I can just keep on it, maybe we'll be able to get a win in this race, which will be really great. I've obviously had 1 win in the Nations already in the go-kart race, but I've not had a win in a GT3 race or a Group 4 race, which has been, you know, over 2,000 points. The go-kart race was only a 2,000 point race. This is a 2,500 point race. It'll be good points for my championship, and 2,500 points would really boost up my points and boost me up a couple of places, as it will give me a 500 point boost, I think it is, because I've got a 2,000, I think under a 2,000 point scoring round still on my my score sheet through the opening 9 rounds, because I think I missed one of the rounds out anyway, and I had a couple of low scoring rounds. As the gap is definitely increasing to P2. This is really going my way at the moment. I'm able to short shift and build that gap up to over 1.5 seconds and driving really nicely. This is some of the best driving I've done, to be fair. I did have high expectations for this track. It's one of my stronger tracks. I love the Nurburgring GP track, and it's probably why I'm able to keep the car within the limits and drive fairly fast at the same time as a gap up to 2 seconds now. Everything is going really well in this race. I pretty much knew though I had to push a little bit on this lap because I wanted to get that gap, make sure that it was around at least 2 seconds going into the pits, because if that Porsche has done the fuel saving that I expected him to have done going into the when he was behind me for the opening 3 or 4 laps, he's going to have been able to save a good few percent more fuel than me, maybe 5, maybe more, maybe up to 10% fuel, who knows. Let's see when we go into the pits at the end of this lap. It's halfway into the race, lap 6 out of 12. It's the safest place to pit. There was no point pitting on lap 5 because then you'd have to do that extra lap on the second stint and you risk getting put into traffic. So I went for the 50% split down the middle, end of lap 6 into the pits, get the fuel in, get a new set of tyres on, and then try and the aim was to put a bit more fuel in the stop to try and make sure that I can fend off anyone in the braking zones, because the Nurburgring GP track is a fairly hard track to get any sort of overtaking done. It's got straights, but if you get good exits from the corners leading onto the final straight, obviously the start finishing line, it's very hard to get an overtake move done, especially when the cars behind me are not the strongest cars in a straight line. So this is really looking good for myself in the Mercedes, which is kind of a medium car for acceleration and straight line speed. As I cut that corner ever so fractionally, as I tried to really push it on the in-lap, you can see picking up a half a second penalty, but that isn't really that bad. You know, half a second is nothing, and I go into pits with 2.5 second lead. You can see the Porsche did manage to save 2% more fuel than myself, but that is actually quite surprising. I actually expected the Porsche to have maybe saved a little bit more fuel than myself, so I actually decided to go fairly aggressive with the fuel. You're going to see putting the fuel in now, going up. I think I actually went over the diamond by a little bit to try and go aggressive. You see, putting quite a lot of fuel in there. Maybe I put a little bit too much in. We'll see now as we come out the pits, as the Porsche just comes out behind me and he's just within the slipstream, so straight away I need to push really hard. But I've got 2 cars that have not pitted on lap 6. A strange tactic. I don't really understand doing that tactic. I can understand in a way if they think they've got a slower car in front of them, but the problem with doing that tactic is that slower car's then going to put fresh tyres on, push really hard on the outlap and come out in front of you anyway. So unless you've done some massive fuel saving, it's kind of a strange tactic. I always think it's best to just pit on the middle, give yourself the strongest car at all opportunities. I understand you can go to the end of lap 7, obviously. It all depends on what fuel saving they have done, but this could work out a bit problematic for myself as I'm approaching cars that are slower anyway, and then they're going to have older tyres on. I've obviously got more fuel to burn, and I'm trying to break the slipstream from P4. I was praying that I wouldn't pick them up in a really awkward position, as we see getting very close already in the slipstream of P2, and I'm driving obviously on fresh tyres, driving aggressive to try and break that slipstream. You can see the Porsche is really driving aggressive, also trying to pick up my slipstream. I'm getting a little bit of a boost off their slipstream, getting very close to losing the slipstream off the Porsche behind me, but these two are fighting up ahead. This is not what I wanted on my outlap from the pits with fresh tyres on. This is getting so close. You can see the Porsche getting to within half a second of me. I'm having to be really patient on the throttle because I couldn't just make a move. I decided to go to the left hand side to try and get down the left. The Porsche though picks up the slipstream with the Porsche in front of him. I then go to the right hand side, but he covers that off. This is frustrating for me. Obviously they're battling each other, but the Porsche goes in deep there. He goes ghosted, so I go to go on the inside. There's contact at the rear. I don't know what happened then. It looked like a bit of contact, but luckily we all get away with it. He got across the track. When he ghosted, I thought he was got a penalty and he was lifting off, so I went to go on the inside, but suddenly his car unghosted, and this is one thing that I think they could do with having a look at, because it can cause incidents like that. Luckily I got away with that, kept in P1, but the Porsche and the Evo are right behind me now. That Evo flashing the Porsche as he goes into the braking zone. I don't quite know why he was doing that. Maybe he's just letting him know that he's not going to make a move. Possibly that could be the reason for the flash. I don't really know. Or he's trying to distract him somehow. I could see it in the mirror as we're riding on board with P2 now. And I'm trying to push to break that slipstream for the second time. Fortunately, I did fuel up quite aggressively, so I could drive a lot more aggressive on this second stint. And it has worked out for me kind of now, as I've got a clear track in front of me. He's obviously going to be able to drive aggressive as well. He had 2% more fuel than me, but he did gain about second on me. So possibly that he's overfueled a bit, but not to the same extent that I have. So if he's driving aggressive now, he could become very vulnerable at the end of the race. This is going to be really interesting to see how it pans out, as 3 cars now battling for the lead. 3 different manufacturers, the Evolution, the Mitsubishi, the Porsche 911, and myself in the AMG GT3, pushing really hard there. You can see going through the really fast chicane, the area where the Mercedes is a little bit weaker than the Porsche and the Evo. Both them cars very strong through sections of the track like that. The Evolution also very strong on its tyres. I know that from Brands Hatch when I drove that car in round 1 of the Nations in season 3. The Evolution really does look after its tyres, so that was one concern I had. If the Evolution was to get past that Porsche, was he going to be able to start putting me under pressure at the end of the race with better tyres than the AMG? The AMG GT3 is a good car on its tyres, but it's not as good as the Evolution is. As we go through the chicane for another time, hooking that up this time, no penalty this time, and getting through that, and it looks like I'm so close to breaking that slipstream to the Porsche again, pushing really hard to try and lose any sort of advantage that slipstream will give the Porsche. You can see going to the right hand side of the track, he's not trying to pick it up, which is really strange. I thought he would have picked that up considering how close he is to losing that, and this is all benefiting me. If he doesn't pick up that slipstream, doesn't get the slipstream, he could become very vulnerable from the Evolution behind him, which then makes them battle, which will give me the advantage that I need, because if they're battling, I can just keep driving smooth and building up the lead as we go over the line with the fastest lap of the race, a 1 minute 57.3, only 1/10 off my qualifying lap. So you can see that lap was really pushing, and considering I was actually trying to break the slipstream on that lap by moving out the way of the racing line, not always driving the optimate line just to try and avoid the slipstream being picked up, it shows you that the pace has been really good. That could have possibly been a really low 1 minute 57, so managing to maintain the pace in this race now, and I expected 1:57s really in the second stint, because the first stint was all about fuel saving, and the second stint with the fuel that I put in was going to be about driving aggressive and trying to push this AMG GT3 to the end in P1. This is going to be so close though. I've got 2 cars still behind me in the slipstream, and it was getting quite intense at this stage. I was starting to feel a bit of pressure. We're coming through to the last few laps, getting so close to picking up a penalty that time through there, so I'm now pushing really hard, but got away with that without getting a penalty. And now I've managed to break that slipstream, getting very close. You can see it's between 8, 9, 10 of a second and a second. Every time we come through to this section of the track, the Porsche's a bit stronger, but then we get through to the sections where the Mercedes is stronger, and I managed to eke that gap out just a fraction more to push it closer to that slipstream braking distance. And this is very close racing, you can see, or pretty much from the start to the lap 9. This has been really close between myself, P2 and 3, and there's quite a big gap developed now between P4 and 3, so this shows you that the pace was fairly good all the way through this race from myself. I was really impressed with it, to be fair, of the pace that I had shown so far, because I've not really picked up massive penalties. I got that one penalty on the in-lap, which was a bit clumsy again. I really do need to stop doing this and picking up pointless penalties. I still think it's a little bit harsh, because I think one mistake going on an in-lap where I didn't really gain much. I went too deep into the corner and squared it off, and actually probably lost about a 10th. And you pick up half a second penalty. This is the kind of situation where I think a warning would be better, and that's what I mentioned on the previous video. I think a little 3 strikes and then you get the penalty, so you know, 2 warnings, third one's a penalty. That's how I think it should be done. That's how I want them to do it. If they introduce something like that, I think it would be perfect. They have actually, a lot of the stuff that I have mentioned on previous videos, like showing the penalties that people have in front of cars, has been brought into the game. So let's see what happens. You never know, someone who is involved with Gran Turismo may pick up on a video, see something and think that is a good idea. So, you know, I heard a lot of positive comments in the previous video I did about that idea. I think it makes sense to have that system. You know, it's used within the Blancpain series, a 3 strike and a penalty system. As you can see now, coming to the midway point on lap 10, we're still just outside that slipstream. We've got him covered pretty much at the moment. I'm managing to keep it over 1 second, and the pace is definitely there. I seem to have better pace in that Porsche, and I'm just trying to keep it consistent without making a massive error. I feel like I had the pace, so there was no point me pushing the extremes. You know, I'd done my 1:57.3. I got the fastest lap in the race, so far it's fastest lap in the race, pole position. I just need this final win now to take the triple in this race. So I didn't want to take any massive risks really into corners and risk making an error and spinning the car around or something like that, because, you know, with some of the luck I've had recently, I wanted to try and keep it clean and get to the end of this race in P1. It's now over 1.2 seconds, so the lead is increasing. He's not got the slipstream to work with, so maybe he's not able to really push his car as hard now, and maybe he's about to lose some time in this race because he just can't really drive as aggressively as he could when he was behind my slipstream. This is really looking very good for myself now as we come into the last 2 laps of the race, still in P1, in control of this race from the start really. One thing I think I could have done better was maybe in the pit stop, I didn't need to put the amount of fuel that I did in. I think I could have put about a second's less worth fuel, got out the pits clean of them, and got ahead of the other cars sooner on the track and put them behind, in between myself and P2, and would have then probably been in a more comfortable position without having to worry about slipstream and pulled away again. You saw in the opening stint that once I was out the slipstream I was able to pull away, so that might have been the more tactical way of running this race. But you don't know stuff like this, you know, you can't, before when you're in the pits, obviously you don't know what fuel other people are going to put in. I wanted to be aggressive, and so far it's kind of worked out for me. You know, I'm still in P1. I can drive as aggressively as I like all the way to the finishing line now. I've got no concerns for fuel. I actually thought at this stage I might have put a little bit too much fuel in. It felt, when I was in the car, I was looking at the fuel thinking it's not really going down when I'm driving aggressively, so I think I could have got away with, obviously the car's lighter when you're on the second stint, you haven't got as much fuel in the car, so I probably could have got away with putting a bit less fuel in and still driving the car really aggressively to the finishing line. But you know, I'd rather have more fuel than I need than less fuel than I need. It's a better situation to be in as we're coming through to the final lap in this race. You can see P3 is putting P2 under a lot of pressure there. You can see he's starting to battle away, and it looks very close between them as I go through that corner, really hooking it up that time. And it looks like P2 has made an error. Looking behind, you see there, P3 has managed to overtake P2. You can see it on the driver list on the left hand side. So a move was made, and now I'm 1.7 seconds clear, 1.6 seconds clear of P2. So I've just got to maintain this gap now to the finishing line. He also has a penalty, the car behind me, so let's see if we can get the car to the finish in P1. This is going to be a great result for myself if I can maintain this lead all the way to the finish. I can, this is more proof to myself that the pace is increasing on the game. I've, since I changed view to this view, everything seems to be getting faster for myself. I'm getting myself in the top 10 stars a lot better. I'm starting to get more used to the AMG GT3. Everything is starting to click now. The new tyre model suits me, and let's hope this is a good start to the next race in this car at the Interlagos in the top 24 race. I really hope I can perform for my subscribers there and give you a really good video to watch on the Sunday after the Saturday's race. Let's hope I can perform there and get ahead of Force and get myself to the World Finals. That would be the ideal outcome from Saturday's race. I will give it all, as this race going pretty much perfectly from the start. You can see I've maintained 1 minute 57 laps up until lap 11, where I've started to just back off a bit, but I can see the car behind me still pushing. So I don't know why I did this here. I pushed really hard for this corner, you see, and went a little bit wide and picked up an instant half a second penalty to add to the other half second. So I'm on a 1 second penalty, which isn't the best situation, but I've got over a second lead, and I know one area on this track where you can get rid of penalties really easily is going into this hairpin. I've practiced it in practice sessions. I know about this corner. I've done it in the Group 4 cars. If you lift very early on this straight, your penalty just disappears, and it doesn't really affect you because you see how fast that penalty's gone, and it doesn't affect you because then you're into the braking zone. You can see I've lost about 0.8 of a second to the guy behind me, but that's not an issue. He's still behind me. I've got no penalty. He's got a penalty. So going into the final corner of this race, in the lead of the race, no penalty to get rid of, and that's how I prefer to do it. I felt safer doing it that way than on the finishing line and leaving it up, because the last race I did, you saw it on the video where the penalty doesn't go at the end of the race. It has happened a few times for me, so I felt safer doing it like that on the final on that chicane. And I've come over the line in P1 with a total time of 24 minutes and 2 seconds, which is not bad at all. I think it could have been a bit faster than that without the odd mistake, but really happy with my pace. I'm really happy with my driving throughout that. I think I drove pretty much perfectly, and I've got the triple, the fastest lap in the race, the qualifying P1, and the win. So a great result for myself. 2,500 points I think it is. We'll have a little look as we go onto the screen to see the 4 points that I got from that. So victory on the podium there in P1. This is what everyone wants to see at the end of an FIA race, is yourself in P1, and 2,526 points. So really happy, and a great race from start to finish. Pretty much faultless. A couple of mistakes that I obviously did, picking up the penalty where I didn't really need to. But they're things I really, I need to look at and try and make sure that don't happen in the big races. I've been doing mistakes like this a couple of times, but still picking up P1. And we're going to move on to the top 24 race on Saturday. Now, I will not be doing the FIA Nations race on Saturday. It's obviously LMP1 right before, I don't want to be doing that before the Group 1 cars, before the Group 3 race. I want to put all my effort into the Group 3 race now. So hope you understand that there won't be a video tomorrow because of that. I'm going to be putting, obviously, my attention tomorrow is not going to be on editing a video. It's going to be on trying to secure my place in the World Final. So make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And leave any comments in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer as many as I can. I can't obviously answer every single one. When I get time, I'll go on there and read some of the comments. I do try and read pretty much every comment, even if I don't reply to them. Anyway, thanks again for watching this video, and I'll be back very soon.